It's time to girl boss our way through the Matrix and hope to God we don't come out with shell shock. It's time for season 8 of Rick and Morty. Thanks for tuning in. I know I haven't made a video in a while, but I'm back, and if I don't make it up to you, you're allowed to send me to a dimension where everyone follows me around saying, you know it's bad to abandon your YouTube audience, right? You're watching WhitneyVision, and this is all the Easter eggs and details you might have missed in the summer of all fears. This is your spoiler warning! If you haven't seen Season 8, Episode 1 yet, hit pause on this video and come back once you've made chargers obsolete. This season marks the first time voice actors Ian Cardoni and Harry Belden are flying solo as the titular characters without having to redub over the voice of a dickbag who doesn't work on the show anymore. And they're killing it! Season 7 had already been written and animated by the time the new voice cast came through because production moves pretty fast. Rob Schraub tweeted in May of 2022 that they had begun writing for Season 8, and Dan Harmon confirmed in an interview that as of now, they've written all the way through Season 10. Dan also gave Polygon a pretty interesting update about what to expect from this season. Apparently, the other theorists out there and I are kinda fucked when it comes to predictions about the return of old lore, because Season 8 is all about single-serving standalone story episodes that don't necessarily connect to a larger narrative. And honestly, that makes a lot of sense to me. I was really wondering what they were gonna do this season after so many plot threads were wrapped up in Season 7. Rick killed Rick Prime, Unity and Evil Morty told the boys not to contact them again, and hell, even Ice-T's subplot came to a satisfying conclusion. And I don't think that the writers are saying that we'll never ever get a lore continuation again, but I do think that taking a break to go on some classic Rick and Morty adventures is gonna help keep the show evergreen and add to its longevity. But let's get into the episode. The episode title, The Summer of All Fears, is a parody of the novel and movie The Sum of All Fears, where a neo-Nazi billionaire tries to start World War III by instigating a nuclear fight between Russia and the US, allowing fascist Europe to take over the world. Obviously, the only man who can stop this kind of evil is Boston's finest, Ben Affleck. In the opening scene, we're introduced to the world of Chargelandia, a technological dystopian world locked inside of a matrix that Rick invented to punish his grandchildren for stealing his cell phone charger. In another interview, Dan explained that he got the idea for the episode from a Valentine's Day gift he once gave his ex-wife, a bouquet of phone chargers because they were both always losing or needing replacements for theirs. Chargelandia's wealthy city center is filled with tech-themed decor, landscapes, buildings, and businesses. They've got a park shaped like a power symbol, and their infrastructure is seemingly built around charge ports in general. Buildings have charger-themed architecture, including HDMI, USB-A, and USB-B shaped windows, awnings shaped like computer chips, chimneys that look like filament bulbs, and charging port-shaped designs on their facades. You'll also notice several buildings shaped like plugs and other ports, such as these Ethernet and DisplayPort buildings. If you're looking to stay the night, you can check into the Cable Hotel, which is conveniently located next to the Lithium Jewelry Shop. While Summer is watching the news, channel CMYK, aka the color model used for printers, we get a peep at some of the charger-themed decorations and trinkets in her office. On the wall, she's got framed covers of magazines she's graced, including Charging Stone, Better Homes and Chargers, and the new charger. An alcohol bottle can be seen complete with its own charging plug, and Summer wears a charging plug-shaped necklace. She appears to have won many awards, including a Tangled Wire Award and some others that look like lightning bolts, lithium, various plugs, and even a wireless earbud. President Sum Sum's also been doing some light reading, with books like Electro, Volts, Plug, and Zap. But it's clear from the get-go that Summer has a plan. On a hidden panel wall, Summer has a photo of the Smith house and a drawing of her parents to remind her of her mission: get herself and Morty back home at all costs. She also has a map of Chargelandia's electrical grid to aid in their escape. Unlike his billionaire tech CEO's sister, Morty is living in an old cabin in the woods with 2 dogs. Out front, he's been tinkering with old cars, a skill he uses back in the Parmesian dimension to build a souped-up tank. Inside, his decor is a lot less lavish than Summer's and a lot more sad. We see photos of his unit when he worked as a firefighter, his buddy CJ's dog tags, a fire helmet, his firefighter certificate, and a picture of a mountain range. While it's not super on the nose like other bits of Chargeria, I'm wondering if this is the 3-pronged mountains Morty talks about later in the episode, where he and CJ jerry-rigged weaponry out of the famously indestructible Nokia 3310. Summer convinces Morty to escape with her, explaining that their exit back to the real world will only work if they time it perfectly so that their mom is in the kitchen grabbing her night wine. She knows that if they wake up alone in the garage with Rick, he'll immediately use the mind-blower gun to wipe their memories. And it's pretty clear that after living an eventful 17 years in a false reality, they don't want to lose the memories they've made or the lessons that they've learned. Morty pops in a USB-shaped earpiece, Summer solves the charging crisis, and they matrix code themselves back home. A lot has happened to these two since they disappeared into the Matrix during Rick's nap. In Chargelandia years, Summer is 34 years old and Morty is 31. Morty has technically been through a few of these traps in his day, such as when he got stuck inside Roy: A Life Well Lived or in the fear hole from the season 7 finale. So let's start with Summer because her response to the simulation was pretty interesting. In Chargelandia, Summer worked her way up to learn the rules of her grandpa's fucked up Black Mirror punishment chamber. She graduated law school charger cum laude with a major in chargers and a minor in English Lit, not business like most tech bros, and made a career in revolutionizing tech. She became a tech billionaire, a world leader, and traveled to Chargentina and the Philippines, Chargelandia's in-universe versions of Argentina and the Philippines. She even had time to marry and divorce a freeloading musician, but the real changes to grown-up Summer are to her attitude and outlook. When she first starts hanging out with her new bestie Beth as a woman in her mid-30s, she catches her mom off guard with her self-assuredness, intelligence, and relatability. Post-divorce Mimosa Wednesday Summer is a lot more like Beth herself than the stereotypical teenage girl she was previously raising. Because that's what happens to most women when they get older. They start understanding and appreciating their mothers a lot more than they did when they were bratty teens. Obviously, some people have crappy moms, but for the most part, there comes a deeper understanding for your parents with age. You finally understand things that they once had to hide from you when you were a kid. For example, my husband did not know that his parents were 420 friendly until we started dating, and now he knows. Because when you're older, not only do you gain some wisdom on your own, you're also in a better headspace to actually garner some wisdom from those older than you. I personally thought I knew everything as a teenager, and while I was right about some things regarding adulthood, I've been humbled by a lot over the years as I've become more open to learning from others. But although Beth believes she's finally found her lifelong It's Wine O'Clock bestie in her daughter at first, it's clear that her time in Chargelandia was a lot more negatively transformative than positive. Sure, she was finally able to rationalize that the opinions of mean girls in high school don't matter, but she also girl-bossed herself way too close to the sun. Instead of using her newfound confidence to uplift other women, including her mother, she ridicules them. After the girls bully her out of school, Summer scoffs that they still believe that recycling is real, mocking their youthful idealism. In reality, Greenpeace estimates that less than 10% of plastic is effectively recycled into new items, so she's not wrong. But come on, don't pass that jaded bullshit onto the next generation, dude. They're burdened with enough of their predecessors' mistakes. She teases her mom at brunch, at the hair salon while Beth is reading Rogue magazine, and in the mall dressing room. 3 of the top 5 most sacred places where women are not allowed to shame each other. The 4th place is obviously when you're super drunk in the girls' bathroom, and the 5th is in the lobby of Planned Parenthood. She doesn't offer Beth any real ways to implement these dramatic personality changes that she suddenly expects her mom to embody. She just tries to convince her to buy expensive blazers, make bad pottery in New Mexico, and become a completely different person overnight. Although I do have to say that Mama Stay is a great name for a vampire cult trapping and feeding off of middle-aged moms. And that's kind of the problem with a lot of tech bro billionaires too, right? They're so far at the top that they're completely disconnected from the reality of the average person. Newsflash, buddy. Throwing money or ayahuasca at a problem doesn't fix it if you don't have the money to throw. A blowout, a suit jacket, and a hippie commune aren't gonna magically make Beth the same kind of person that Summer became in Chargelandia. So it's not just a commentary on the relationships between mothers and daughters as they age, nor is it solely about the ways that women tear each other down to build themselves up. It's also a depiction of what happens when out-of-touch tech bros and billionaires try to relate to the common man. Meanwhile, Morty's been going through a lot. It wasn't enough that Morty was trapped inside of the demonic bowels of a Denny's bathroom for decades the last time that they hung out. Rick didn't think twice before forcing him through another impossibly long, horrifying journey. When he returns from the Matrix, Morty immediately gets to work repairing and tricking out Rick's Death Race car with the mechanic skills he learned in prison. Death Race 2000 was a 70s film that was remade with Jason Statham in 2008, a movie about battling tricked-out cars that undoubtedly prepared him to join the Fast and the Furious franchise 3 years later. Like Beth and older Summer, Rick and older Morty initially start off vibing. Rick is super impressed with his grandson's mechanical prowess, and the two bond as equals over a cooler of beer. Interestingly, it looks like the beer might actually be root beer. I wonder if that was a network change. It's probably frowned upon to show an animated 14-year-old drinking real beer, even if that 14-year-old's body contains the 31-year-old soul of a hardened war hero. Rick is impressed by Morty's history in the armed forces, and this newfound respect may be due to Rick's own military past. He previously fought an intergalactic war alongside Bird Person when he was young. Like Summer, Morty's gained a lot of wisdom from his time on the front lines, and his maturity makes it easier for Rick to relate to him. As we learned last season, Rick considers Morty more of a dog. He's his little buddy who goes on fun trips with him, and he's useful, but he's not his equal. Post-Chargelandia, Rick gains a little more respect for his grandson's experiences, seeing him as less of a goofy sidekick and more of a peer. Morty's PTSD sends him into a flashback of his time in the Matrix. As he's being arrested for shoplifting, check out the name of the restaurant behind him, Macromi's. Even though it sounds like an Italian place, it's actually a reference to Macromi, or macro-motivational interviewing, a type of counseling technique developed in the 80s as a way to treat substance use disorder. Since then, it's become a therapeutic practice intended to resolve ambivalence and empower an individual towards positive behavioral change. Macro-MI is the same counseling technique applied to a larger community-oriented scale, teaching individuals how systemic injustices can affect them individually, and encouraging them to make systemic change. Rick obviously intended his experiment to force Summer and Morty to make a serious effort to change their propensity to steal his phone chargers. But I'd say Summer really implemented the macro part of MI, using her political office to influence widespread change. In court, the scales of justice above the judge are balanced with chargers, and Morty is declared guilty as charged. Sick pun. In prison, Morty has a parody poster of the Raquel Welch 1 million years BC poster from Shawshank Redemption. Inmates here sport USB-C jumpsuits, and Morty's cellmate has a ton of electricity-themed tattoos, including a 9-volt, mAh, which stands for milliampere an hour, a unit of measurement for battery capacity, an A23, which is a Samsung Galaxy model, a skull with plug prongs for devil horns, a ribbon that spells out charge, and a plug-shaped rook. Morty himself gets a tattoo that looks a little bit like an electrical parody of the Rolling Stones' tongue logo with a tab of acid on it. Mick Jagger and logo designer John Pash chose the tongue sticking out to represent the band's anti-establishment attitude. The acid tablet version of the logo would come to prominence during the Vietnam War, when LSD took over counterculture and played a role in shaping the anti-war movement. Here, Morty's tattoo is his own form of countercultural expression against the Matrix, while also being an interesting insight into his mindset. With the charger consuming its own charge, there's a degree of self-inflicted pain at play. Matrix Morty throughout this episode holds great guilt over his actions backfiring, from getting arrested to later being powerless to save his platoon, to the very fact that his Matrix buddies would have never felt the pain of a war-torn existence if it wasn't for Morty stealing Rick's charger. Despite Rick and Summer being truly at fault, Morty internalizes this guilt. Or maybe it's just a shitty prison tattoo that he got because he was bored. When he's fresh out the slammer, Morty heads to a bar. The wall decorations are also electricity themed, like the license plates that say Electri, Battery Life, and Electric. There, he meets CJ, who happens to have the same prison tattoo, as well as another of a plug with barbed wire wrapped around his bicep. The two join the fire department, where they enthusiastically toss a bucket of water on an electrical fire, which for the record, you should never do. But when checking wires and stopping fires isn't enough for them, the whole crew joins the military, fighting terrorists in a war over lithium. Morty's killed 5 times over the course of duty, regenerating each time and earning 5 Purple Hearts, the medal awarded to military members who are wounded or killed in battle. He's killed for the first time when his buddy 8-Ball steps on a landmine, and it's not too long before Chop Block, Marmaduke, and even CJ are killed too. As the last remaining soldier, Morty kills Osama bin Laden and heads back home a shell of a man. The use of immortality to win a war kind of reminds me of Edge of Tomorrow, where Tom Cruise fights aliens with time loops. But all of Morty's charger Matrix trauma compounds, and he crashes out hard in present-day Parmesan. He traps Rick in his own anti-Matrix matrix, peppered with references from the movie The Matrix, like that blue Pilsner poster, a red pill-shaped trash can, and a club called White Rabbit, a nod to the woman with the white rabbit tattoo that Neo's told to follow. Inside, Rick actually rebuilds the machine's power plants from the Matrix, shoving Oliver Twist into the last pod before solving the simulation like Summer did before him. This is why Rick respects Summer so much more than he does Morty. She can tap into her own genius when she really needs to. Meanwhile, Morty's tank rampage mirrors the Killdozer incident of 2004, where a disgruntled US Air Force veteran drove a tricked-out homemade tank through town. In addition to a snorkel attached to the engine block, Morty also added an 8-ball to the top of his gear shift as an homage to his fallen homie. Summer saves the day once again, this time by confessing to her brother that she orchestrated the entire war, putting him in the line of fire so that they could both get back home. After saving the facility from nuclear destruction, Rick charges the power plant workers a 20% tip that's immediately paid to him in the form of 20% of their nuclear power rod. In the final scene between Matrix Morty and Tech Bro Summer, Morty wrestles with his guilt but also his nihilism. He knows that in the grand scheme of things, CJ and friends were nothing but NPCs, meaningless data built by Rick just to fuck with him. But in a certain light, they're really no different than he is. Morty has been fear-holed. He's lived multiple lifetimes inside Roy simulations, and experienced Severance as a night person without the benefit of falling in love with Helly. He's clicked away from a lifetime of love, and seen a metric multiverse of other Mortys being tortured and killed by one of their own. There's even an entire section of Rick's lab filled with tubes of memories from adventures and possible lifetimes that none of us, including Morty, even know about. Needless to say, Morty is well aware of how insignificant he is too, and a part of him feels ashamed for forming these attachments in the first place, knowing that they'll eventually come to a horrifying, pointless end. Summer is able to free him from his pain by owning up to the fact that she created the circumstances surrounding his self-hatred, and her acknowledgement of his friends helped give him the agency to live life on his own terms, not Rick's, not hers. Fittingly, that's why the Matrix trappings of this episode work so well, because it's an exploration of the red and blue pills. Rick represents the blue pill, mind-blowing Morty and forcing him to forget the trauma of their adventures. Summer is the red pill, manipulating Morty into her scheme to retain memories of the truth. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter which pill Morty takes, because the real power is in the freedom of being able to choose. The central theme of Rick and Morty often goes back to "nothing matters, let's watch TV." And here, Morty's rampage is an attempt to simply change the channel, to have a shred of agency in a meaningless world outside of his control. So the solution is synthesis. Morty will free himself of the emotional burden and PTSD from the Matrix, but he'll also keep a little reminder of his time in Chargelandia, the same tattoo that he and CJ had when they met. It's actually a really sweet way to honor the meaning his fallen friends brought to his life in that hellscape. But I'm not gonna lie, if Morty gets a tattoo to commemorate every single time something fucked up happens in a world within a world on an adventure, dude is gonna look like Jared Leto's Joker by the end of next week. But although I mentioned up top that Dan Harmon isn't gonna do a bunch of lore pickups this season, I wonder if there is one element from this episode that might come back in the future. Summer doesn't actually delete the video that her older self sent her. Could Chargelandia Summer's message come back to inspire her inner scheming politician to return in the future? Those are all the Easter eggs and details that I could find in Summer of All Fears, but I want to know if there's anything I missed in the comments. Like and subscribe to WhitneyVision, don't forget to install your snorkel, and be sure to check out my podcast, Guardians of the Galaxy with Tommy Bechtold and MT. I'm Scarlet Wit, and you're watching WhitneyVision.